Wait for it. You're live.
Well, it is Friday and we are the 9th of January, and this is Senate Transportation. And we are here with Jeremy Reed, who is the chief engineer of the Highway Division. I want to apologize for being a little late. I went over to Joint Fiscal and I couldn't find Chris Roop. So, and then I got lost and then I found it.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to make that it's Chris's fault that we're late. And I hope he's watching, but it's not really, it's my fault. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Jeremy Reed, Chief Engineer for the Agency of Transportation. Let me share my screen. Okay, we're here to discuss a report that was compelled by Act 145 out of the 2024 section about the use of telecommunication in the right of way, and an inquiry as far as what other states do to perhaps monetize the telecommunications in the right of way.
What's the photo? Is it historic photo or is it modern black and white?
No, that's a historic photo. So that's early 60s building of the interstate at the Checker House Bridge. Nope.
Oh, Checker House?
Yeah, Richmond.
Okay.
Right after
The
Richmond.
bridge, well, we redone that bridge
Correct.
and made it much bigger.
Wider, yeah.
But we kept the historic shape,
Exactly.
because
Right.
that's what the community
Right.
wants.
So this is the construction of the interstate bridges that are adjacent to that.
And that would be the Conan firm, just beyond.
And Route 2, the historic road.
And I served in the legislature with Gloria when I first came here.
Okay.
Wow.
Small state. So here's the compelling language that yielded the report that I'm about to present on. So I want to jump right to the key findings of the report, just so there's a little bit of context about the information that I'll present. So the right-of-way and utility locations, electric utility locations through the right-of-way are generally pretty well known, and the accuracy of that information is pretty good. Communications infrastructure data is lacking in both completeness and accuracy. As we looked nationally, there's two approaches to monetize or regain the value of telecommunications in the right-of-way. One is a bit of a bartering approach, and there's two approaches to that bartering. One is to incentivize further build out of broadband where the public utility or the telecommunications utility wouldn't otherwise do it. So you're basically incentivizing additional build out. The second approach is to build what would essentially be DOT infrastructure for ITS systems and AOT or transportation uses of that broadband. The second approach is revenue generation. That's your typical, monetary compensation pieces. The ultimate finding is that it's largely unknown if the costs associated with the operations are covered by the revenue collected, unfortunately. So
Is that the purpose of the study?
Yeah.
Okay.
with that, no, the purpose of the study was principally just to figure out what we're doing in the right of way right now, and then essentially look at what other states are doing. So there was no mandate to in any way quantify what the possibilities are. And through the presentation, you'll understand why that is largely impossible at this point. So the consultant started by looking at the existing data sources, and in a very subjective manner, they assigned a low, high, medium completeness and accuracy rating to the various data sources. So the right-of-way lines, we have a pretty good handle on where the right-of-way is. and it's generally accurate. Where the rub gets is historic right of way is on a two-dimensional drawing, and it's not GIS located and things like that. That being said, we have data for the majority of the state. Again, the 1111 permits, completeness, there's some older permits that we don't have good data on, and the accuracy is pretty low on that, principally because the 1111 process is meant to be not onerous. So it's very much just, yeah, we're generally putting an asset here. And it's, again, not GIS located. There's no GPS coordinates or anything like that. It's very kind of two-dimensional on a piece of paper,
Not
basically.
the 1111 permit is needed for any project that touches the right of way.
Correct. Yeah. And whether it be a driveway permit for your house or, you know, a gas line running down the right of way. Yep. So then we looked at the communications data sources. Public Service has 3 data sources that the utilities themselves self-report on: the broadband status, data fiber routes, and cable routes. You'll notice there's a distinction between the broadband and data fiber and cable routes on the accuracy and completeness. And largely what that is caused by is the manner in which it's reported. So the broadband is reported by an actual physical address of the house. The other 2 are reported based on a approximate center line of the roadway notation. And so you've got some variance as far as where that is. But again, both or all 3 scenarios are based on a house and connected residence or building, not necessarily relative to the right of way.
So are we gonna talk more about that first? Do you want the question now?
Sure. Well, Susan.
Or,
If it doesn't interrupt, the flow, go.
okay, so broadband to the house, it identifies the address of the house.
Correct.
To me, I'm not that interested in getting revenue from that because that would be from the individual. I would be interested in getting revenue from the main lines,
Mhm.
basically. So that's where the data that we're getting isn't what it should be.
Well, perhaps it's not data that's extremely useful for the purposes that we're talking about today.
Okay,
Right. So I think when DPS is receiving this data, it's more about the build out, not to quantify the assets in the right of way. So I'm just presenting what the existing data sources are,
Yeah.
and the current objective of capturing this data is to understand the proliferation of broadband, not to quantify the volume in the right of way.
the volume in the right of way is really important to estimating the revenues.
Correct, but currently nobody's recording that.
Okay,
And that's sort of the point of the limitations of the data.
Like they know they like have a map of where the broadband is going, but it doesn't overlay with the right of way maps directly. So
Correct.
somebody'd have to go with GIS, all that, and say, here it is in the right of way, here it isn't.
Correct. And to a large degree, the accuracy of both the right of way and the asset, we'll call it, is plus or minus a certain amount. And we'll talk about why that's a problem in a little bit.
okay, but I did hear that it's within the right of way. And that they generally just say that it's in the middle, but it's not necessarily in the middle.
No, it's absolutely not in the middle. What
Okay.
they do is they reference the center line to determine where the asset is.
Okay,
So the broadband references a physical address of a house or a building. The other 2 reference the center line of the road.
Okay.
So it's the reference point. If that doesn't mean that's where the asset is,
is it within the right of way?
maybe.
Okay, so we're gonna have to talk about this more, because when you go, if you have a roadway project, right, in that area, they'll tell you pretty quickly where it is, because they don't want it to be cut.
In general terms, yes. In precise terms, no.
But we don't need precise to have a fee for that.
Well, so you do.
We just need
and-
it to be in the right of way.
Well, so here's the principal problem here. Our roads, right? Generally, utilities go straight. And so what our approach is when we ask for, or when we grant permission to be in the right of way, we want them on the outer bounds of the right of way. So when we come in with subsequent projects, there's less chance of an interference.
Sure.
So you need to have a certain level of precision to know whether it's a foot outside the right of way or a foot inside the right of way. And that's the crux of the problem, is we don't have precise enough data to determine whether it's a foot outside or a foot inside the right of way. And nobody really knows that, just because it's construction and you've got a crew out there, they're laying it plus or minus 3 or 4
They
feet.
got permission to lay the line in the right of way. But they might have laid it out because they were going straight line, but did they get permission from the landowner to make that, cut that corner? Probably.
Uncertain, right? And a lot of times I think when we give them permission to be in the right of way, it's over a period of distance.
Right.
It's not specifically at this location, be 2 feet inside the right of way line.
I mean, my feeling was that we would just say that it is in the right of way and have them prove that it's not.
Yes. Yeah.
It's,
Right.
if we gave them permission to put it in the right of way and they didn't put it in the right of way and they didn't get permission from the other landowner, then for the purposes of this, we should say.
Or they can move it out.
Yeah, and I think when we give them permission, we say, you know, over this, let's just say 2-mile stretch.
Yeah.
Yes, you can run it in the right of way. It would be probably very expensive for them to parallel our right of way line though.
Right, so if they didn't put it in the right of way, then they put it in somebody else's property. They just need to tell us where they got permission,
Mhm.
and it would be very clear what parts are and aren't. So we say that we gave you 2 miles of permission. We're gonna assume you put it in the whole 2 miles until you tell us where you did. And put it on.
Would they do that?
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
yeah.
Well, they're getting something for free, basically.
They're getting something for free from us or the
They're
other
using
landowner,
a
because they could have told the
public
landowner, the farmer, they
Yeah.
was like, oh, we're in the town, we're in the state's right of way. And they're like, oh, okay, I guess that's the state's right of way, but they could be 2 feet off the farmer's land. Farmer's not getting compensated. We're not
Yeah.
charging them because we don't know if it's in the right of way.
Or they could have been on farmer's land for part of the way and are compensating the farmer.
Yeah, we don't,
Yeah.
that's kind of what you're saying, so we don't know.
That's exactly what I'm saying. At current state, we don't have precise enough data to have any certainty in exactly where this stuff is, enough to monetize it with confidence.
Okay, so let me just say something. They know where it is. The fiber people know where it is. They can, they may not know which ownership is where it is, but they know where it is.
So maybe, right? I mean, you can ask any road foreman or, you know, public water supply guy, where's your water line?
Water
Yeah.
line's different.
In what regard?
I mean, they generally know where it is.
And I guess that's my
understand how
point.
that-
Right.
But that's a public asset. These are private assets that are
Right.
extremely valuable. And if it's cut, it doesn't just have an impact right there. It has an impact for possibly hundreds of miles.
Sure.
So they know where it is.
So it's my understanding that just the practicalities of construction, they know generally where it is, but I don't know that they know within a foot that this is where it is. And I'll just say from firsthand experience, when we did Richmond, Wilson Richmond, I think it was, Route 2 reconstruction, we were driving guardrail posts through their fiber frequently because they didn't know exactly where it was. They thought it was outside. And again, there's certain, you know, standard deviation that they would.
Okay, and that's fair. And I'm sure there's anomalies, but generally, I mean, that infrastructure is really important to them.
Mhm.
So
For sure.
if we ask them to tell us where it is, they should be able to provide that information.
Jeremy, do we have the 111 permit for all? Anytime anybody did think they might be in the right of way, they got 11 permit.
In theory, yes, but I think the bigger the company, the more likely it is, you know. And anything of any, anything new, certainly, you know, something, and again, what we're talking about telecommunications, it's all new. Do we have an 1111 permit for potentially a pole that was placed 30 years ago? Maybe not, but yeah, I mean, anything new from a broadband fiber install, we probably have a level for support.
The 111 permits though are every driveway access.
Correct.
But could you, I assume.
And what we have. If it's an older property. It's hit or miss whether it has a 111 permit.
Correct.
Right, well, I just wondered if, for the telecommunications, I assume it's a searchable database and this isn't paper, but it could be, it's not in a searchable database. You can't just say telecommunications.
Right, and that's why the relative accuracy and the completeness is medium and low, because there isn't a GIS layer for all the 1111 permits.
Well, but
Or something that's even, and I don't know the full searchability of it, but I don't know if it's tagged fiber, broadband, electric utility, water.
the utility.
I don't know to what level of granularity they compiled it.
They're all filed with the deeds.
In theory, yes. I mean, and I will say, we've certainly come across instances recently where somebody was working in the right of way and didn't get an 1111 permit. Right, I mean, that happens as well, just like any other permit.
I'll give you an example. We just built a duplex. We shared a driveway with an existing house that was built, the house was built in the 1820s. It was shot, the existing driveway had no 1111 permit. And it was a driveway being used by a farmer down behind, the brick house that was built in the 1820s. And then we come along and they said, sure, we'll let you use the driveway. You pay us a little and you can access the same. And we figured out there was no 1111 permit for anybody.
Right.
And they've been living there and, you know,
Right.
the house has been occupied forever. They now have an 1111 permit.
Who just for my own knowledge here, who picks up the tab when the fiber is in your right of way and you drive the post?
They do.
They're
Yeah, so long as we dictate it, right, as requirement law, it's on them.
Are those marked every half mile or something, or is there?
I don't know.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the little green
Yeah,
thing that, but I don't know if there's a standard delineation for the policies.
But even with dig safe, you hit on,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, and that's sort of my point.
Oh, yeah.
Construction in theory
Yeah,
are,
nothing's perfect.
Right.
So there's always gonna be that.
so again, general sort of takeaway from this slide is the data is lacking.
Sorry, I just keeping the revenue is lacking too.
So they're moving on to looking at what other states do. There's two relevant MTHRP reports. One from 2014, managing longitudinal utility installations on controlled access highways rights of way. And a 2023 report, the valuation and compensation approaches and utility accommodation. From those reports, 10 states were looked at to investigate deeper, and we actually held interviews with 9 of these states, and we looked at any information that was available prior to that interview. There are public stated strategic goals for this trying to regain the value of letting them in the right of way. You can see a lot of it has to do with trying to further broadband build out and basically serve the public interest along that line. Iowa actually has, one of the goals is they have a environmental program, which I'll identify later, that this partially funds. So here are the states that try to monetize it. And again, it's not all 10 states, obviously. And I guess the important thing here is to recognize that other than Utah, the states that monetize it only monetize it in limited access highways. So interstates, it's obviously what we know, 89, 91, 93. And then freeways at the end there, they're limited access highways, 189, Super 7, things like that. And the obvious sort of restriction there is interstates are much more clearly defined. They're much straighter. So monetizing it becomes a lot easier on a limited access highway than what our state routes are, just given again, that serpentine, nature of state highways, especially in Vermont where it's hilly and we're avoiding ledges and all that stuff. So this talks about the use of the revenue that is captured by the states. Again, Iowa's has the Living Roadway Trust Fund. And other than that, it's largely about either ITS enhancements for the DOT or, just furthering broadband build out in some manner or respect.
Can I just ask a question? So under the Utah one, it says in-kind donations. So is that the companies basically, when they're requesting a permit, they're making a large contribution?
I think what that is largely that, yes. Or instead of paying it in an actual monetary piece, they'll be like, okay, we'll run some ITS fiber for you while we're doing our fiber.
I just want to put a pin in that feels like maybe a way to get it, the lack of data and having almost like a rate for these costs without information. It sounds like you wouldn't need that in that scenario, but I've never heard of doing that. It's an in-kind contribution to the state from a large company to basically get more beneficial permitting.
Yeah, and it sort of falls in that second category of borrowing as well, where it's okay, if you do something for us, we'll give you this amount of right of way to occupy, or we'll allow you to occupy this amount of right of way. And depending on the use, if it's ITS, they don't necessarily generate any revenue off that. If it's a further build out, potentially they do recapture some revenue over time, but it wouldn't necessarily be, the return on investment wouldn't be there otherwise through traditional market conditions.
And do you know if Utah says like, hey, this is what we think would be a reasonable amount for you?
So that's where the crux of the argument is too, is across the nation, there's this uncertainty as far as what is a fair market value.
Yeah.
Right? Because we can't just arbitrarily charge something because we're trying to raise, say, $10 million because we use federal highway money and they don't want us to profit off their investment. And so trying to assess a market value of what the value of their occupancy is can be a challenge. And that's where one of the NCHRP reports tried to understand. But again, it's a very squishy calculus. There's not a defined methodology that's widely accepted. Like, just do this and you'll be fine.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that? So do the financial regulations allow private companies to benefit from the service from the right of way?
Yeah, I think implicitly they do.
Prohibit it?
No, I think implicitly, of course they do, right? We give them access and then they have a business model that profits off, whether it be a cable company or broadband or fiber or whatever. I mean, that it's a for-profit company. So their presence in the right of way is by definition a for-profit occupancy.
And they're allowed to, and that's not a problem.
Correct.
And is it a problem if we regulate that?
No.
That's you. That's your other committee. That's
Yeah. I mean, in the terms of regulate,
Or charge a fee.
Yeah,
Charge a
it is
reasonable
entirely,
fee.
yeah, it's entirely legal to charge some fee. The operative word there is reasonable, and there's not a defined methodology on what reasonable looks like.
Okay,
But if it was a CUD, it would be a nonprofit.
right, and so I would want to treat them differently, but that's another conversation.
So the challenges which we've touched on throughout this, there's in all likelihood limited interest to have full collaboration from the telecom companies for obvious reasons. Currently, we don't have the staff, and by we, I mean the enterprise, the state government, to administer this program. There's unquestionably going to be a time delay between when we stood up such a program and to when we actually started receiving money, because we have to basically build the program, create the administration, and collect the data before we even assess a fee or a lease. There will be the perception that this is a regressive tax, essentially, because the per foot per hookup is much lower on urban or rural areas than urban areas. So it would counter the goals of broadband build out potentially.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
So if you need to be in the right of way for, I'll say, a quarter of a mile in an urban densely populated area, you're going to hook up many more people than in a rural area. So you're able to defray that per foot cost much better in an urban area than in a rural area.
Yeah, and well, that's a whole conversation too, because they aren't really, the privates aren't doing it in the rural areas unless they've been subsidized, but, okay. But that wouldn't apply if we're doing it in the, interstate right away.
It would apply less, right? I mean, 89 through Chittenden County is still going to be denser than 91 through, Orleans County.
What was the regressiveness? Did you cover that?
That essentially for rural areas would be paying a higher tax essentially per hookup
Per customer.
because we would be charging more per customer in that sense.
I'm sorry, I have to say something, just on that. It's not, in some cases, fees are passed on to the, customer, in other cases, they're not. That doesn't always happen. Like in housing, for example, the price of housing is what the market will bear. If developers have to pay fees or if costs increase, they can't necessarily increase the cost of the house. It's a market phase. So I just.
Again, perception would be that it would slow deployment of broadband if we were charging the utility to build new assets that could I guess cool the incentive to do so. Uncertain revenue estimates, again, because we don't have the data, so we don't even know what this would yield. And then uncertainty whether or not the revenue generated would actually cover the cost of administering the program. When we spoke to all 10 states, well, 9 states said, we don't know. I believe it was Iowa said definitively it absolutely does not cover. And so there is a significant stand-up cost to have precise enough data to collect a fee and again create a fee structure. The other piece I want to touch on here is there's 2 approaches to actually monetizing this. One would be kind of a permit fee, which is generally what we do now. The other approach that many states do is they actually lease it over a 25 or 30 year period. Some of it's indexed to inflation, some of it's a set index point, others it's just a flat lease for over a 30-year term or 25-year term.
So if a municipality has to put like water or sewer, I know this is a different conversation than telecommunications, which sounds like what you focused on, but do we charge them?
I don't think so. There may be a nominal just 1111 permit fee, But we certainly don't try to monetize that, right? Between electric and water sewer, that's deemed for the public good,
Okay.
right? And we're not looking at that. That's not a for business enterprise.
Okay,
So for example, if the main street in the village of Jeff is a state highway.
Yeah.
And the water lines for the village are down that main street. You wouldn't charge for that.
Not in a monetization fee. I'm not sure there may be a nominal permit fee, but again, I think it's very low. And I'm not even confident that that's true.
yeah, maybe we can ask, because I think the only key takeaway I have from this is, from that question, is if we are charging a fee that is being charged to municipalities.
Yeah.
I would, in that space, it feels like.
Well,
we should
yeah.
be.
So if I can say with confidence, whatever we're charging a water company, we're definitely charging the broadband company.
Oh, great, okay.
There would not be, we're charging the water company, but we're not charging the broadband company. And I'm fairly confident we're not monetizing the water company either. So there's no scenario in which the broadband company is being treated
More favorable.
more favorably. Correct.
Thank you.
So in conclusion, and I'll just read this from the report, a successful right-of-way monetization program in Vermont requires precise data management, significant development of workflow and process, strategic legislative support, collaborative industry engagement, and transparent fee structure frameworks. Currently, the agency, while highly capable, is hobbled by the aforementioned challenges and would have to allocate significant resources against uncertain outcome.
I'd put the highly capable.
I'm sure you know that already, but I just wanted to reinforce the points.
Do you see a world, I appreciate that conclusion, but do you see a world where we could, at the very least, have better barter and negotiation in these conversations? And is there any kind of enabling legislation we could do on our end? Because I think, at least what I'm hearing from your point is, I don't want us to be in a situation where we're losing out on a revenue source for a for-profit, in particular company. But I also don't think, I think you're correct. It sounds like we would not be able to get like a fee structure set up that might even compensate us enough to cover the cost of doing all the work
Right.
of charging people. So do you have a policy or a standard, and could we address that and maybe ask it to be a bit more aggressive in getting?
Sure. So historically speaking, there's two pieces of legislation that are at odds with each other. And this goes back to well before the Scott administration and into the Shumlin administration, if not sooner, earlier. One basically says thou shalt recover some costs associated with assets in the right of way.
Okay.
The second piece of legislation says thou shalt not do anything that inhibits the expansion of broadband.
Mhm.
And so going sort of on the sort of authorizing language, I think we would need some level of clarity as far as which one should we follow. Again, multiple administrations up to this point have chosen to do nothing that discourages the expansion of broadband. From the bartering piece, some of the challenges I see there, and I don't know specifically how other states do it, but you would want to create a system that treated all entities relatively fairly, right? It couldn't just be a horse trade because somebody who's a better negotiator is going to get a better deal, or somebody's having a bad day and they acquiesce, right? So you want to create some level of equity.
Okay.
That being said, it's probably the simplest approach because you don't have a precise calculation as far as what that costs. And so the level of data integrity is probably lower, or the required data integrity is probably lower.
Yeah, I really like the Utah. Oh, I think it was Utah. Or no, Iowa. I apologize. Iowa's the Living Roadway Trust Fund. I'm gonna dig. I'm gonna look a little bit into that
Yeah.
because I think we've already heard this year that or it was in the Climate Solutions Caucus. There is a bill from House Transportation to look at how do we better manage our roadways, like the size of our roadways when it comes to pollinators and all sorts of things. And that has costs associated with it, unfortunately. So I'm thinking a little bit about that. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on how they do it.
Sure.
On what.
I will say, I don't know the details of the program. I will say Iowa was the one state who said this program does not pay for itself. Right, so there's that. The other thing I'll mention, and I think this committee's talked about it before, even if the program did pay for itself, there would have to be some discussion on how efficient of a tax this is. Right, so if we are, from an administrative perspective, spending 60 cents of every dollar collected, effectively, you've only got 40% efficiency of tax. And so, what we found based on what we looked at, no state is using this approach to bolster their transportation fund. They're doing it for other public good, essentially. And so from a peer monetized perspective, this is, to our knowledge, is not a successful approach that's been widely used.
Well, thank you for taking the time.
You know how many 111 permits for telecommunications are being applied for?
We could look to see, what say the last 3 to 5 years looks like, but I don't know.
Like, is it common or not?
So you don't have, if it's Fidium that's running a line onto, and they're the same company, onto a Vermont Electric pole or a pole from Consolidated,
Mhm.
they don't have to get a 1111 permit.
I believe the way it works is the owner of the pole gets the permit, and they may or may not, I'm not sure, identify everybody on the pole.
Like if they get a new person, do they have to go back to you and say, hey, we have a second line?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Because most of these poles in my area, and it's interesting when you bring up, you wouldn't want to tax the CUD. My CUD has a contract with Fidium, and they have a lease. So the owner of the pole, the owner of the infrastructure now is my CUD. They're hooking to poles that are probably about 50% owned by the electric utility and 50% owned by Consolidated. And I don't know the exact amount, but the pole system and the utility companies pay a property tax. So I don't understand the whole system in any detail, but that just even in the ownership, it's kind of sloppy. Yeah,
And
go ahead.
Yeah, the broadband on the highways especially, right? There is broadband in the interstate, right? On the interstate right away.
there's fiber. I don't know to what extent we have broadband.
Okay, so fiber.
Yeah.
Yeah, fiber that's why it's so valuable on the railroad, is because it's a long continuous span. So you don't necessarily have to know exactly where it is if it zigzags, and the interstate is nice and smooth. I mean, that's the point of the interstate, right?
Yeah.
One of the purposes. So we could know the length, right? And the amount of fiber by certain companies,
Yes.
and that would be not that hard to come up with a fee for.
Yeah.
And that would be it would be revenue.
This does get exponentially easier if you limit it to your limited access highways.
Yeah, so why don't we start with that and just keep the conversation going, because there's a lot of money being made on that.
Well, your list, what all started with interstates.
Correct. The only state that we found that uses state highways is Utah.
Yeah,
And again, I think the topography of Utah is probably different than Vermont.
Mhm.
So, the other thing I'll just add, another sort of nuance or complicating layer here is the definition of telecommunication. So most electric utilities with their electric lines have telecommunication lines. And so for their own purposes. So again, that definition would have to be sorted out.
And those are on interstate.
No, I'm talking in general here,
Yeah,
not.
yeah. I think we should really focus on the
distribution companies, usually the telephone company in the past.
Hmm.
Consolidated, shares poles with the utility company. You know, in my area, it's about 50-50 and they share poles. As landowners, no landowner wants one pole for the power company and one pole for the communication lines. If you're gonna have a pole, you might as well just have one.
Right. Well, and I guess I was just to clarify, I was speaking that, let's just take Velco, for instance. Velco has, as I understand it, a telecommunication line with their electric line just for their own purposes, not as a separate entity. Or, Washington Electric, if you have smart metering, there's a telecommunication line with the electric line to facilitate net metering. So, beyond even separate entities attaching to the same pole, electric utilities oftentimes have telecommunications sort of as, complementary infrastructure.
I just wanted to make a note that if you want to work on language or have something that's considered on this topic, I would certainly be interested in talking through it for probably the T-bill more than the DMV missile.
Oh, definitely.
bill. But,
Yeah.
So we've been time. So I just wanted to, if you worked with Damien on language or anything for something around limited use highways and almost like an in-kind contribution style thing, I would be very interested.
Okay, great.
At least to look at it maybe further, because I appreciate this study because we had no information before this. So.
And do we own the right of way for the interstate? Or is it
Yes.
some-
Well, we own it and the usage of it has to fall within federal requirements.
So do we have to get federal permission?
I think it's just a matter of, hey, can we do this? I don't think there's a formal process.
Well, if you got 10 other states doing it,
Yeah.
it's probably
Yeah.
permissible. And the other thing about the interstates is they were laid out later.
Right.
And because they were laid out later, there's none of this, a house from the 1850s
Yeah.
that doesn't have an 1111, they did all the surveying and that, so we pretty much know exactly where the interstates are. And we don't know that in my area of Route 15, some places it's wide, some places it's,
Yep.
and I would suspect,
You suspect correctly.
yeah, that Route 4 is the same.
Or even parts of Route 5.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the state highway system is, to your point, like this, and fair or not, our center line has sort of meandered over time as well, and most of this is measured from the center line.
The feds don't have their own 111 permit. Yeah.
No,
So let's keep the conversation going with and looking at the interstates. How about that?
And I would agree with Senator White, if you had an idea you wanted to put on the table, we'll consider it.
Okay, great, good, thank you.
thank you.
I think we are on